Hello and welcome back to this presentation. And now we are critiquing Sadhguru, Errors of Sadhguru, Part 5. And today I will discuss 5 variations of yoga, even deviations from yoga in the Sadhguru version of yoga. Okay, so there is a traditional classical version standing, and there is a Sadhguru version of it. And in this session, we will discuss these things. So, this 5-point critique of Sadhguru's interpretation of core yoga principles, especially focusing on his perspectives on Jnana Yoga, the role of intellect, memory, and the ultimate purpose of yoga. Number 1, misinterpretation of Jnana Yoga as a path of intelligence. Sadhguru frames Jnana Yoga as the path of intelligence, which risks oversimplifying the traditional understanding of Jnana Yoga. Classical Jnana Yoga is not about intellectual or rational understanding, but involves direct experiential realization of the self as the divine ultimate reality and as the self as every other thing. Thou art that. You are that TV, you are that radio, you are that light, you are that computer, you are that gal, you are God. So there is no distinction. So direct experiential realizations claim of non-duality is the knowledge of Jnana Yoga. And it involves self-inquiry called Atma Vichara. The focus is on transcending the intellect, ego, and mental concepts to attain non-dual awareness of self as identical with the Brahman or ultimate reality. So, Jnana Yoga is the Atma Jnana, or the knowledge of the self as ultimate reality, or God him itself, not him. Here it's it. Nirguna Brahman. So you are that Nirguna Brahman. Everything is that Nirguna Brahman. So non-dual. All the differentiations and dualities or illusions are Maya. But Sadhguru emphasizes the intellect and misinterprets Jnana Yoga as the path of intellect, whereas classically in Vedanta, the intellect is part of the dualism and is part of the problem of illusion. and it cannot be used to reach the stage of their consciousness or the knowledge of self. And this main difference between the original or classic Vedantic yoga, Jnana yoga, and the Sadhguru version, in which intellect is used in a supportive way, whereas in the classical, intellect cannot be used. So, by emphasizing the role of intellect in the supportive role, his interpretation is interpretation and misleads practitioners and paints a picture of yoga as something intellectual, which it is not. That is what he is doing. Even mutating the original yoga version, where intellect is problem, to using the intellect and even defining Jnana yoga as the path of intellect, and then sidestepping entirely supportive role for intellect. How can it be both? Is it intellectual pathway to knowledge of the ultimate reality, which is not possible? Or is it just a supporting role? Is this supporting role called Jnana yoga? These questions need to be raised. Number 2, emphasizing the role of yoga as a tool for well-being rather than self-realization. Even though he talks about the later aspect called spiritual aspect of Guru, he doesn't, that's not what he's discussing most of the time, even though that is the problem he's supposed to solve as a Sadhguru, because he is the Guru at self-realization. So that is a Sadhguru. He is not a Guru in wellness, he is not a Guru in environment things, he is not a Guru in meditation. In meditation may be used, but he is not a Guru in diet. He is only Sadhguru, is the Guru at self-realization. And in that core error is he is now telling in this age, in the 21st century, since you cannot say intellect is a problem, you cannot say like Osho, leave your footwear and mind outside. That's Osho's ashram. You get that book. Whereas he is, of course, asking them to leave this footwear outside, but bring the intellect, and he's mutating. Mislead people into thinking that Jnana yoga is a pathway of the intellect. Just a total misinterpretation. The second point we have to tell that he is promoting yoga as a technology for well-being to optimize health and overall functionality. But this is not the aim of yoga. So there are other aims. He thinks this is the bait and hook. Everything is this side. This is what he is always talking about. The benefits of well-being are considered secondary effects. It's not even a part of Jnana yoga, because they don't care. This is all illusion. Wellness, health, mind, body, all these dualities and variations are the illusion. And they are not considered important in Jnana yoga. Whereas this is a variation of that. And here, yoga is a technology for improving your overall health. Number 3, simplifying the concept of memory as a barrier to yoga. Sadhguru describes yoga as a means to distance oneself from karmic memory, all the bad things you have done over multiple lives. That is the reason for what is happening now. Therefore, Sadhguru is helping you to distance yourself from this karmic memory, including genetic, elemental, and karmic. And this will remove the influence of karma on your life or hold of karma on your life. But this idea diverges from traditional yoga focus on samskaras, which are mental impressions, and karma as primary influences on behavior and identity. Classical yoga teachings emphasize purifying and transcending these samskaras through disciplined practice and self-inquiry to free oneself from karmic bondage. Sadhguru, on the other hand, by equating memory with identity and focusing on managing memory, so much so that this can be called some form of memory management. Sadhguru's interpretation is simplifying the deeper work of spiritual purification that is central to classical yoga. And that is only important because they are focusing on some form of liberation from the dualities. Whereas here, all forms of dualities are, co-opted. And the problem itself is transformed into a solution. Number 4, over-reliance on intellectualization and the mind in yoga. Sadhguru's explanation often encourages practitioners to use their mind and intelligence to approach yoga and self-inquiry, which contradicts with traditional teachings that regard the mind as an obstacle to true knowledge. Okay, this mind cannot be used to obtain the true knowledge of, or the true jnana. But that is where, I don't know how he could not see that. Jnana Yoga is path to that true knowledge, and he is defining Jnana Yoga as a pathway of intellect, which is totally wrong in that philosophy. In classical Jnana Yoga, the intellect is seen as limited and incapable of fully grasping the absolute truth. It must be transcended, not utilized, to achieve enlightenment. It is a problem. That is a distinction. Intellect, body, mind, all these things, it doesn't exist. Traditional yoga aims to quiet and transcend the mind rather than reinforce its role or use the mind or use the intellect. And true realization of the self as divine, which is the jnana or knowledge of self divine, only arises in mental constructs resolved and rejected. By implying that the mind and intellect can serve as tools in your Sadhguru's interpretation is contradicting yoga philosophy, Vedantic yoga philosophy, Jnana Yoga, and is a wrong version of Jnana Yoga. Number 5. Framing of yoga's goal as self-improvement rather than self-transcendence. So, at least initially, Sadhguru can see that if you want to sell this to a lot of people, They cannot do all those things. Okay, self-liberation, all the disciplines, all those things. So he is just giving them something they can accept, which is in vogue, which is the trend, which is the fad, is that yoga goal is self-improvement rather than self-transcendence. Sadhguru often frames yoga in terms of self-improvement and transformation, suggesting that yoga shapes and determines who you are by refining your identity. In classical yoga, however, the goal is not to improve the self, but to transcend the ego and realize the eternal self, which is the Atman. So that is the core goal of yoga, is to realize the eternal self, the Atman, who is now reborn as whoever you are, who was somebody in the previous birth, who will be somebody else in the next birth. Yoga's ultimate aim is self-realization, where all distinctions and dualities dissolve, revealing the universal consciousness only, non-duality. But this is not what we see in Sadhguru's description of these spiritual acts. He's talking something else. He's talking like you will not feel distinction between body, mind, and emotions. That's all he says at one. The basics of yoga in his website. So this is totally different from the classical Vedanta yoga or the yoga which is of the Patanjali. What is this? So by emphasizing self-improvement, Sadhguru's interpretation may risk diverting practitioner towards personal development goals rather than spiritual transcendence, which requires dissolution of the ego rather than removing it or using the intellect. In other words, these top 5 errors of Sadhguru are regarding his own philosophy compared to the classical yoga of Vedanta and Yoga Sutra. He is misinterpreting and forming a new version which will be acceptable to these people who cannot reject the intellect. That's why his yoga is intellect and engineering and technology and whatnot. Okay, none of which he studied. He studied just his literature and he is playing with words. So that is his wish, but we should know that this is not even that yoga. Okay, this is not even Vedanta. This is not even Jnana Yoga as classically understood. This is a pseudo Jnana Yoga. This is a pseudo yoga, pseudo self-realization, spiritual experience. Okay, where the intellect is used. So that totally goes against the non-dualistic aim of Jnana Yoga. The very core understanding of Jnana Yoga has been violated. Therefore, the conclusion I can draw is that Sadhguru's version of Jnana Yoga is pseudo Jnana Yoga, okay, which is acceptable to, understandable, accessible, which is even sellable, marketable. Okay, so now we have completed this core important error of Sadhguru, which is his version of Jnana Yoga, and any version of Jnana Yoga is wrong, which already described in factual errors, logical errors, epistemological errors, methodological errors, internal contradictions, external contradictions, etc., which I have done with Vivekananda as well as with Yogananda. So this is, he is not even agreeing with his own, what he is describing as, what is in the texts, what has been accepted as Jnana Yoga. So that is what we are telling. This is the pseudo Jnana Yoga of Sadhguru. Thank you for joining. May God bless you. Jesus loves you.